All right, I said earlier that I can never get tired on anything that concerns Igbos and, clarification on the history of Igbos, because this history is not always clear. People tell the story differently, and I still believe that one day people will come together and get it straight by connecting the whole dots. Yes, we have done as much as possible, before now to give you guys videos on Igbo origin and how Igbos are connected. But this one is a bit different, as in the way it was explained. And so there are some things actually you are going to get from this video. And after that, we will talk about the history of Asaba people, So, but let's start with the connection of Igbos, Benin, this Igbo Benin stuff that has always, dominate the space in terms of history and culture. Let's go there.
I was scrolling through social media and I came across a comment that stopped me. The person wrote, the Igbo people came from the Benin Empire. At first, I wanted to keep scrolling, but then I noticed something. There were thousands of people arguing under that post. Some agreed, some were angry. And so many other people asked, is it true?
So I decided to go looking with elders, with books, and with respect.
And what I found was far more interesting than the argument itself, because the answer is not as simple as yes or no. When our elders tell story about where a people came from, they are not always talking about the same thing. Sometimes they're talking about a kingdom. Sometimes they're talking about a family. Sometimes they're talking about a journey. And sometimes they're talking about identity. The first thing I discovered is that there has never been a single story about the origin of all Igbo people. If you travel across Igbo land, you will hear different stories. You will hear different traditions. In some places, elders say their ancestors emerged from the land they now occupy. In others, they speak of migration from nearby region. The people of Inri tell one story. The people of Arochukwu tell another. The people of Onitsha tell another. That alone should make us careful whenever somebody claims there is only one origin story of millions of people. Where did the Benin claim come from? To understand this, we must first understand something very important. For centuries, the Benin Kingdom was one of the most powerful kingdoms in what is now the southern Nigeria. Their influence is far beyond Benin City. Their trade has traveled. Their armies moved. Their culture spread. Their neighbors knew their power. Because of this, many communities around the River Niger interacted with Benin in one way or the other. Trade crossed the river. Ideas crossed the river. People crossed the river. Even titles, clothing style, court customs, and artistic influence crossed the river. The Niger was not a wall. It was a road. And as you know, the road connects people. This is where the story becomes interesting. Among the Igbo-speaking community west of the Niger, especially in today's Anyoma area, many oral history speaks about relationship with Benin. Some communities remember periods of Benin influence. Some remember migration stories. Some remember princes, warriors, traders, and families moving across the river. These stories are part of their history. But then we come to Onitsha, and this is where the debates usually becomes louder. According to Onitsha oral history, their founders left Benin during a secession dispute. The story tells of a royal group that crossed the Niger and eventually settled where Onitsha stands today. To this day, some aspect of Onitsha kingship and their court traditions shows similarity that many people connect them to Benin. For supporters of the Benin origin theory, this story is important evidence.
But here is where people get confused.
Onitsha is not all of Igbo land. Even if every part of Onitsha traditions were accepted exactly as told, it would explain the history of Onitsha, or it would not automatically explain the origins of Owerri, Mbise, Nsukka, Nri, Arochukwu, Ohofia, Afikpo, Ngwa, Ikwere, and hundreds of other Igbo communities. That would be like saying all Nigerians came from Kano, because some communities have link to Kano. History does not work that way. Then, there's another reason people become confused. The name Benin appeared on many old European maps, and this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. When European traders sailed along the West African coast, they often gave large regions names that make sense to them. One famous example was the Bight of Benin. Another was the Kingdom of Benin. But these labels did not always match ethnic identities. A person could be living in an area Europeans associated with Benin and still be Igbo, or Ijo, or Shekiri, or another people entirely. Map name and the ethnic identity, we are not always the same thing. This confusion became even bigger because of Oloda Equiano. Many years ago, some people noticed reference linking his name to Benin. They immediately concluded he came from Benin. He must have been Edo. But Oludo himself repeatedly described himself as Igbo. That is one of the old forms of the word Igbo. In other words, a geographical label was being mistaken for an ethnic identity. And that mistake still appears online today. But perhaps the most important lesson came not from books. It came from the way our ancestors understood themselves. When elders in many Igbo communities spoke about who they were, they did not describe themselves as people who had forgotten another identity. They spoke as Igbo. They spoke different dialects. They belonged to different clans. They followed different traditions. Yet, they recognized a shared cultural world. A world connected by language, customs, markets, marriage, spirituality, and memory. Could some communities have received migrants from Benin? Yes. Could some royal families have connections to Benin? Yes. Did Benin influence some neighboring Igbo communities? Absolutely. But is there evidence that the entire Igbo people migrated from the Benin Kingdom? No. This is where the story ends. Not with a fight, not with an insult, not with one group trying to erase another, but with a simple truth. History is more complicated than the comment section. The story is not that Benin and the Igbos were strangers. They were not. The story is that neighbors can influence one another without becoming one another. And sometimes, the biggest mistake we make is turning a connection into an origin. Because interaction is not the same thing as ancestry. And influence is not the same thing as identity.
This is based on oral history and research.
You see how the Europeans thwarted and rewired most of the things concerning the Africans and other people. Some people wake up like Asia, they wake up and, change back some of these things that was changed. And let me tell you, I myself, I prefer that we go back to where these people met us and change all these things. It's not difficult. We can start now instead of changing our history to another thing that we don't understand, causing problem for us here and there. It's better we go back to where they met us, 18 whatever, they met us, and we amend majority of these things so that we can have our true identity. These people, are they God? Are they trying to create us in their own image? Are they wrestling with God? No, we must not allow that as Africans, Nigeria in particular. Some African countries have gone back to change their own. So, but Nigeria have not done anything. Everybody's eyes is on oil, on how to grab money. That is it. And we are so lazy. We are so lazy to go back to drawing board and redo these things. That is the main thing now. Well, I left it for, people to reason it out. Let's go into this, history of Asaba and connection of Asaba and the influence of, people around Asaba. Let's go.
A few days ago, I saw two men from Asaba arguing. The first man said, "How can you say you're not from Igbo? You speak Igbo, you bear Igbo names, your traditions are Igbo." The second man replies, "No, I'm an Yoma, not Igbo." And just like that, an argument that has lasted for over decades started again. At first, the answer would be simple. If a people speak Igbo, bear Igbo names, and practice customs that look Igbo, then surely they are Igbo. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized the story is not really about language. It is about identity. You see, before Nigeria existed, nobody woke up and said, "I am from Delta State." Delta State did not exist. Anambra State did not exist. Even Nigeria did not exist. People identified themselves by their villages, their clans, their kingdom, and their ancestors. Among the western side of the river Niger lived communities such as Asaba, Ibuzo, Ogwashioku, Iseluku, Onitsha, and many others. They spoke dialects of Igbo. They used market days similar to those found across Igbo land. They gave their children names that sounded familiar across the Niger. Their marriage customs, their title systems, festivals, and burial traditions shared many similarities with communities around the river. If everything looks Igbo, why is there still an argument? The answer may be sitting right in front of us, the river Niger. Today, many people see the Niger as a boundary, but our ancestors saw it differently. To them, the river was a road. Canoe moved constantly across it. Traders crossed it. Families crossed it. Ideas crossed it. Stories crossed it. Because of this, the people west of the Niger did not interact only with Igbo communities. They also traded and lived alongside Benin, Urobo, Isoko, Ijo, and many other peoples. 100 of years culture mixed, influence blended, identities became more complex. Then the British arrived. And as they crossed Africa, they began drawing lines on the maps. Communities that have been connected for centuries suddenly found themselves inside new administrative regions. The map changed, but the people remained. Years later, after new states were created, another identity began to grow. Among many Igbo-speaking communities in Delta states, that identity was Anioma. Many people today do not know the Anioma is actually a modern name. It was formed from 4 major areas: Tianiocha, Ndokwa, Eka, and Oshimiri. The name helped unite Igbo-speaking communities west of the Niger under a shared identity. And this is where things became interesting. Some people embraced Anioma while seeing themselves as Igbos. Others began to see Anioma as a distinct identity of its own. Over time, politics, regional pride, and personal belief made the discussion even more complicated. That is why if you ask 10 people from Asaba who they are, you will hear 10 different answers. Some will proudly say, I am Igbo. Some will say, I'm Anioma. Some will say, I am both. Some will reject the Igbo label completely. Yet, when elders tell old stories, certain things keep appearing. The language, the customs, the names, the traditions, the memories that connect communities on both sides of the Niger. This is why historians generally describe Asaba and many Anioma communities as parts of the wider Igbo-speaking world. But history and identity are not always the same thing. History asks, where did you come from? Identity asks, who do you choose to be today? And sometimes those two answers are not exactly alike. Maybe that is why the debates refuse to die. Because it is not really a debate about language. It is not even a debate about culture. It is a debate about how people see themselves. And perhaps that is a much harder question to answer. So let me leave you with this. If two brothers speak the same language, share similar customs, and tell stories of common ancestors, but one says he's not the same people as the other, who gets to decide the truth? History or the people themselves?
We are welcome back from Asaba sector. We are going to, have a fresh and different, idea when it comes to colonization. Colonization did a lot of damage to Africans and other places that was colonized. A lot of damage. Well, I want you to hear this young woman, what she has to say about colonization. That thing is a kind of criminality, that colonization. Because you are trying to change what, people, the way they are. You change a lot of things, though somehow you cannot equate it to being criminally, an act, but it has thwarted a lot of things that people are regretting. You keep wondering how these people were able to even fighting. Okay, what is that good thing you are bringing by fighting people? Why would you fight people? For what? If people say they don't want, you leave them and go. Eh? What is that thing that is good you want to deliver to people and you are fighting them? Just tell me. Because there are histories of wars from Britain in Africa, in Nigeria. They fought the Kumeku War, the Arochukwu War, and other wars that they fought. Well, let's hear from this young woman what she has to say in that regards.
You know what people don't talk about enough? How colonization wasn't just about stealing land. It was about hijacking the mind. They didn't just conquer people, they rewired them. That's the real psychological warfare. Convincing the oppressed that their suffering was order, that obedience was holy, and that freedom was chaos. They used everything, religion, education, even language, to reprogram people's sense of self. They told colonized nations that their gods were devils, their languages were primitive, and their traditions were backwards. And once you believe that, they don't have to chain you. You'll just police yourself. They created the civilized versus savage binary so deep in the global psyche that even after independence, people still chase Western approval. That's the genius of colonial psychology. It doesn't end when the flag comes down. It ends when the mirror changes. Religion was the most effective form of control, though, right? They didn't just introduce Christianity, they redefined it. They replaced the liberating parts with obedience. and called submission divine order. They turned the same book that said, "Let my people go," into a handbook for staying in line. They said, "Blessed are the meek," all while enslaving the meek. They said, "Obey your masters," all while being the masters. That's not faith. That's psychological warfare dressed up as morality. And then came the schools, where they taught colonized children that Europe discovered everything, invented everything, and is everything. They erased native history, rewrote resistance as rebellion, and called genocide progress. They didn't have to burn every village. They just had to teach the children to see themselves as less. And when those same children grew up and started leading, they were already half colonized in the mind. That's how you keep control. You don't need armies when you've already conquered identity. Now they call it globalization. They call it humanitarian aid. They call it free market. But it's the same game, it's just different packaging. Debt traps, development loans, sanctions, media. They don't have to occupy you anymore. They just have to convince you that you're free while they hold the receipts. Fenyon warned us about this. Not because he was violent, because he understood the violence of being told your only value is in proximity to whiteness. Colonialism didn't disappear, it just rebranded. They don't need whips when they have Wi-Fi. They don't need chains when they control what you see, what you learn, what you dream of becoming. That's the war nobody sees. The one that makes oppression look like order. Because once the mind believes the master is moral, the body doesn't even try to run. Fucking hell.
Alright, viewers, you're welcome back. But I tell you that I said we can never get tired when it comes to Igbo origin. Well, I am still Chinedu. If you have anything you want to tell us, and don't forget to subscribe if you have not subscribed to this channel. Like it and share this video till I come your way next time.